Imagine waking up in a country that doesn't exist. Imagine waking up tomorrow and your country is gone. Not in the sense that borders are redrawn, not in the sense that someone else moved in, but gone. The government has vanished. The laws no longer work. Police do not exist. Schools, hospitals, and banks are closed. Roads crumble. Cities feel abandoned. And there is no one to turn to for help. Now imagine that, in the middle of this chaos, one region decides it will no longer wait for the world to fix it. It will take matters into its own hands. It will become a country, even if no one else agrees. This is the story of Somaliland. Unlike some nations whose origins stretch back thousands of years, Somaliland's modern history begins relatively recently. Its story is not one of empires or ancient dynasties. Instead, it is the story of a small region determined to survive and govern itself amid collapse. Located in the Horn of Africa, the area that is now Somaliland has long been a crossroads of trade, culture, and migration. For centuries, its people were organized into clans, connected by language, shared customs, and loyalty to local leaders. Coastal towns engaged in trade with Arabia, India, and beyond. The region's history was shaped not by kings or emperors, but by the relationships between communities and the land they inhabited. In the 19th and 20th centuries, Somaliland became a British protectorate. The British did not fully colonize the territory in the way other regions were controlled. Instead, they managed relationships with local clans, protecting strategic ports and trade routes while allowing many aspects of daily life to remain under local authority. This arrangement gave the people a sense of autonomy, even under foreign influence. During this period, the region developed a unique identity. People learned to navigate the balance between traditional authority and colonial administration. Education and trade flourished in towns along the coast, while inland communities maintained their own systems of justice and governance. Then, in 1960, a brief independence was granted. British Somaliland became its own country for a short moment, before voluntarily uniting with its southern neighbor to form the Somali Republic. This union was built on the idea of a shared language and shared heritage, but unity is never easy. Differences in colonial experience, administration, and expectations created tensions that would later become serious challenges. For the people of the North, independence was fleeting, but the sense of self-determination remained alive. Generations had grown accustomed to local governance, and loyalty to clan-based leadership was strong. The North retained a unique perspective, a small region with a long history of autonomy, suddenly part of a much larger state, with a government and priorities often centered far to the south. During the following decades, political instability in Somalia began to take its toll. Governments changed frequently, policies were inconsistent, and trust between the North and the central government slowly eroded. People in the North felt distant from decision-making. Development was uneven, and tensions quietly simmered under the surface. Despite the growing discontent, daily life continued. Families worked their land, traders sailed along the coast, markets thrived. People held on to hope that unity might eventually bring peace and progress. They adapted, survived, and waited. But sometimes, survival is not enough. Sometimes hope is tested by circumstances beyond control. The late 20th century brought new challenges. Political decisions made far away in Mogadishu had growing consequences in the north. Economic inequality, centralization of power, and neglect of local concerns created frustration among the people. The sense that the northern region had been forgotten, that its voices were unheard, slowly intensified. Through all of this, Somaliland's people maintained a quiet resilience. Life had always demanded adaptability here, whether navigating trade winds, scarce rainfall, or shifting political alliances. The communities learned to rely on each other. Elders, family networks, and traditional councils provided order when official structures could not. By the end of the 1980s, it was clear that a breaking point was approaching. The national government was increasingly weak, and tensions between regions were growing. People in the North began talking more openly about the possibility of governing themselves, reclaiming authority, and restoring the independence that had been theirs, however briefly, in 1960. This was not a sudden idea. It had been forming quietly for decades, shaped by history, culture, and the repeated lessons of survival. The northern region remembered what it meant to manage its own affairs, to negotiate disputes internally, and to keep peace through local consensus. So, when Somalia began to collapse, the people of the north did not panic. They did not flee en masse. Instead, they prepared. They consulted their leaders. They reflected on what kind of future they wanted to create. And they began imagining a new Somaliland, a region that could function as a state, even if no one else recognized it. After declaring independence in 1991, the region had survived the collapse of Somalia. But surviving is one thing. Thriving as a state is another. The cities were damaged, infrastructure weak, and social trust fractured. Communities had endured war, displacement, and trauma. Yet, the leaders of Somaliland were determined not just to survive, but to build something that could endure. The first step was reconciliation. Somaliland is a society deeply connected to clans. Family lineage, local elders, and traditional councils historically govern social and political life. Any attempt to build a central government without considering these structures would have failed. Leaders recognized that power sharing needed to be grounded in local legitimacy, not imposed from above. So, in the early 1990s, peace conferences were organized. These conferences were not ceremonial. They were intense, long, and often tense meetings. Clan elders, religious leaders, businessmen, former fighters, and intellectuals came together to discuss how the new state would function. The aim was simple: prevent cycles of revenge, establish agreements about governance, and ensure internal peace. One of the first conferences took place in Berbera, a coastal city that had long been a center of trade. Participants debated representation, the role of elders, and the balance between modern institutions and traditional authority. Another important conference was held in Burao, where leaders formalized agreements on ceasefires and power distribution. These discussions could last for weeks. They were meticulous. Every detail mattered, from who would hold local authority to how elections might eventually work. The key principle was peace first, government second. Instead of rushing to create a centralized executive, the leaders focused on building consensus. They knew that a top-down approach would fail in a society shaped by clan networks. By the mid-1990s, these conferences had laid the foundation for a functioning state. Local administrations were formed, militia groups were gradually disarmed or integrated into formal security structures. Roads were repaired. Basic civil services resumed in towns and villages. Next came the question of political structure. Somaliland's leaders faced a unique challenge. They needed to balance modern democratic principles with traditional clan authority. Too much emphasis on democracy could alienate elders who had long been the guarantors of peace. Too much reliance on clan authority could undermine fairness and national cohesion. The solution was a hybrid system. Under this system, clan elders were given formal roles in a council that functioned similarly to an upper house in a parliament. They had the authority to advise on critical matters, mediate disputes, and ensure representation across different communities. An elected president served as the head of state and government. The president was accountable to the people through elections, not just through clan approval. Political parties were allowed, but there were safeguards to prevent fragmentation along purely clan lines. This system was not perfect, but it created legitimacy. Citizens felt represented both by traditional leaders they trusted and by elected officials who answered to the broader population. In 1997, Somaliland organized its first peaceful local elections, a remarkable feat given the circumstances. Voters participated in municipal elections to choose council members in towns across the region. These elections were widely regarded as fair and transparent, and they helped consolidate local trust in the new system. The success of these elections set the stage for further institutional development. Leaders began planning for a national constitution, a document that would formalize the country's governance principles and outline the rights of citizens. In 2001, Somaliland held a constitutional referendum. This was a pivotal moment. Citizens voted to approve a new constitution that defined the structure of government, the role of the presidency, the legislative framework, and the responsibilities of the judiciary. The constitution was passed overwhelmingly, reflecting broad support for the political system. By this point, Somaliland had achieved something extraordinary. It had established a stable government in a region where neighboring Somalia remained fragmented. It had created regular political processes, including elections and legislative sessions. It had built institutions that balanced modern governance with traditional authority. And all of this was done without formal recognition from any other country. The Constitution also set the stage for future development. It outlined principles of human rights, rule of law, and citizen participation. It recognized the importance of both local autonomy and national unity. These principles would guide Somaliland as it navigated the complex political and economic challenges of the 21st century. Elections continued to shape Somaliland's political landscape. Presidential elections were held in 2003, 2010, 2017, and beyond, with peaceful transfers of power. Parliamentary elections also took place periodically. While there were occasional disputes, the overall system functioned with remarkable stability, particularly when compared to southern Somalia. The success of these elections was not only political, but also symbolic. It demonstrated to the people that their voices mattered. It proved that a society with a history of clan conflict and war could organize democratic processes. Somaliland also built its judicial and security institutions from the ground up. Courts were established to handle civil and criminal matters, blending traditional mediation methods with formal legal procedures. Police and military forces were reorganized to serve the country as a whole, rather than specific clans or regions. Education and civil services gradually expanded. Schools reopened, literacy programs were promoted, and local economies were revitalized. While resources were limited, the government worked to ensure that communities had access to basic services. A critical aspect of Somaliland's success was local ownership. Unlike other countries that relied heavily on external aid, Somaliland's development was driven largely by its own people. Traditional leaders, diaspora communities, business people, and civil society organizations all contributed to rebuilding efforts. This created a sense of shared responsibility and reinforced the legitimacy of the new state. By the mid-2000s, Somaliland had achieved a level of internal stability that was rare in the region. It had functioning institutions, a functioning political system, and a population committed to maintaining peace. Yet the question of international recognition remained unresolved. Most countries still considered Somaliland part of Somalia. It had no United Nations seat. Its passport was not widely accepted. Foreign investment was limited by legal uncertainty. But despite these challenges, the people of Somaliland continued to govern themselves effectively. They demonstrated that legitimacy could be earned internally, without depending on external validation. The story of Somaliland's construction shows that building a state is not only about declaring independence. It is about creating institutions, maintaining peace, balancing tradition and modernity, and earning the trust of citizens. From the rubble and chaos of the early 1990s, Somaliland became a model of grassroots state building. It proved that even in the absence of recognition, governance is possible when communities prioritize stability, justice, and consensus. By the end of the 2000s, Somaliland was widely recognized as one of the most peaceful and organized regions in the Horn of Africa. While challenges remained, the foundations laid during this period allowed it to survive where other regions struggled. This was a remarkable achievement, a country rebuilt from nothing, almost entirely from internal effort, demonstrating that legitimacy and stability can sometimes come from the people themselves, even when the world refuses to acknowledge them.